on welfare tourism. My problem statement is, from a Danish perspective, what are the consequences of free movement of labour and the structural differences within the EU, and how could these consequences affect the convergence of the welfare state? My problems are, what is welfare tourism and is it an existing problem for the EU member states? What are the general differences between the European member states in terms of social policies, and should we move towards a convergence of the European welfare state, and which possible consequences will it have for the Danish welfare system? First of all, I will look at welfare tourism, and it is important to look at the free movement of labour, which is a key element in the single market, as it means that all European citizens have equal rights to benefits in all European member states. And some people argue that welfare tourism is a consequence of this free movement of labour, as it is as it in Appendix 7, the liberal Library briefing. It says that it's an exploitation of favourable welfare benefits in other member states. In Appendix 4, Morten Messerschmidt comments after ECJ verdict limiting the possibility to reserve social benefits welfare for Danish citizens. It is clear that he believes that welfare tourism is a problem, as he believes that it's an exploitation of Nordic welfare regimes. For example, he believes that wage differences is causing economic imbalances, as 9 out of 10 Polish would gain more from receiving welfare benefits in Denmark than working full-time in Poland. Also, we can see in Appendix 1, the UK's Cameron right to worry about welfare tourism in the EU from 2013. We can see that Britain is also believes that welfare tourism is a problem, as they have initiated restrictions on welfare benefits aimed at migrants. And Cameron also stated that free movement within the EU needs to be less free. So this is to be seen a decrease in equal rights to benefits for all citizens. However, Appendix 1 also states that there are no clear statistics on whether welfare tourism actually exists in the EU. So we can see in Appendix 3, which is impact of mobile EU citizens on national security systems from Europe.eu, and that in the report by the Commission from 2013, it says that immigrants are not more extensive users of welfare benefits than nationals. So we can see that, in conclusion, we can see that there's no real clear statistic material on welfare tourism, and we cannot conclude whether or not it's a problem. But we can, in Appendix 3, they state it's not a problem. However, Messerschmidt still argues that deepening integration of EU creates financial difficulties in favourable welfare systems such as Denmark. We can see that there's this ideological dimension, which means that there's a difference in how we look at welfare tourism, and we can also argue that statistics are interpretable, so we cannot conclude whether or not it is a problem for the EU member states. Then I will look at the general differences between the European member states, and we can see that Europe is facing a large problem because there's a large diversity concerning social policies, and we can see in Appendix 2, the EU social model from Debating Europe, that for example, unemployment benefits, Denmark has a percentage of GDP of 2.43%, which is the 5th highest, whereas we can see a great difference to Poland, which is the lowest percentage share, only 0.42%. Also in terms of healthcare benefits, we can see that Ireland is in the top 5% of GDP, in which they spend 12.22% on healthcare, whereas only Poland only spends 4.51% of GDP on healthcare benefits. Also, in terms of minimum wage, we can see that Luxembourg is the highest with a minimum of 1,874 euros, which is in grave contrast to Romania, which is the lowest, has the lowest minimum wage of only 157 euros. So these numbers show that there's an extreme structural difference concerning social policies in the EU, and this can connect to the different welfare models, as there are different welfare models in the EU, such as the social democratic model in the Nordic countries that focus more on social policies, and the key principles are universalism, redistribution, and social equality. And this is in contrast to the liberal and the corporatist model that which do not have this great focus on these aspects. And due to these differences, it might be difficult to reach an agreement on a common model, and therefore a compromise could be argued would not be possible. But we can see in Appendix 6, the next supermodel from The Economist from 2013, that it underlines the differences between the Nordic model and the EU, and it states that the Nordic model has some positive aspects, and therefore we might be a future solution to this convergence that other states should look at towards the Nordic model. As in conclusion, we can see that there are these grave structural differences in terms of social policies and welfare models, and the question is now whether or not these are too grave for convergence. So I will now discuss whether or not we should move towards a convergence of the welfare states and which consequences it will have for the Danish welfare system. And we can look at it from two main perspectives, both the Euro enthusiasts and Eurosceptics, and they have different standpoints, which is important to notice. But we can start by looking at the positive aspects of moving towards a convergence. And first of all, we can see in Appendix 10 that it will perhaps, which is the role of the European social model speech by Laszlo and Dürr from 2013, which says that the convergence will solve the economic crisis as implementing the right social policy means investing actively in human capital and social cohesion. These are prerequisites for competitiveness and economic growth in the global marketplace of the 21st century. So he believes that it will strengthen the EU's positions in the global market, and it will have positive, and this will of course have positive aspects for Denmark. And we can also see that Denmark has an unsustainable welfare system currently, as it is in Appendix 5. It's stated that some economists say that Denmark's current welfare system is unsustainable and risks become unaffordable in 2020. So, and also in Appendix 5 it states that Denmark has moved from an 8th to a 5th place in terms of competitiveness, and therefore a convergence would be positive, as it would increase our competitiveness and improve our economic status. And it will perhaps a convergence will perhaps also create a balance in the EU concerning social policies such as labor issues, which will even out the wages in the EU, and if this will increase competitiveness for Denmark, as our wages would be lower, of course. We can also look at welfare tourism, which might be a problem, and therefore it might be wise to converge for Denmark, as it will result in some more similar welfare systems in the Euro, and it will lessen the exploitation of the Danish welfare system. Against this convergence would we could argue that EU is not an OCA, and therefore it makes it hard to implement a common policy in Europe, and it makes it hard to have a convergence. And this also connects to the structural differences in the EU, as mentioned in question 2, and they are perhaps too different for convergence of these social policies, as a common welfare state would mean that Denmark would compromise on sovereignty and the welfare state. And also we can see that in the public opinion in Denmark, it would be due to the public opinion that is against the integration in Europe, or many are against integration in Europe. A conversion would therefore be difficult, and we can also see that Denmark's welfare system is a big part of the Danish identity, and therefore convergence that would require a lessening of this welfare system would be not good. And also, if we look at liberal intergovernmentalism, we can see that a converging welfare state would be a problem because of domestic forces within the member states, because there are many in opposition to this deepened integration in the EU. We can also argue that there's not enough solidarity in the EU, because states act according to their own interests. And looking at intergovernmentalism, we can see that this might be a problem in terms of conversion. Also, as we've seen UK move away from these key principles of the EU, which show a lack of solidarity. So in conclusion, we can see that a conversion could be beneficial for Denmark in terms of competitiveness and also economically, but there are problems regarding the ideologically set welfare state and the public opposition to a convergence. So in conclusion, we can see that the free movement of labour can perhaps cause welfare tourism, and in Denmark the structural differences and favourable Danish welfare system makes us more prone to welfare tourism. However, we cannot, welfare tourism is not provable through statistics, so we are not certain whether or not it is a problem. But if it is a problem, then a convergence of the Danish welfare state would be a good idea. But the structural differences within the EU makes it less possible for a convergence, because the economic and structural differences in terms of social policies are too different. But this again depends on an ideological perspective. But in terms of Denmark, convergence would be a compromise of our welfare system, and this is deeply embedded in the Danish nationality, and it would require that we slack on some of the key principles regarding universalism, equality and redistribution.